All right, well, plenty to come on this. Some of the issues that, of course, come to mind when you look at the postponement of an election is, firstly, that this has never happened before. Secondly, that is not in our constitution. Thirdly, of course, all of the medical advice which was given by the panel investigating this, pointing out how difficult and how dangerous it might be to have a local government election, lots of political activity, lots of meetings, people going door to door during an election period and during a pandemic, particularly as the time when that process was underway in the height of the third wave. The third wave may well be slowly easing, but there's no guarantees on what will happen next. Well, let's get more reaction to this decision by the Electoral Commission to go to a court to ask for the local government elections to be postponed. The spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance is Siviwe Gwarube. Siviwe, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. I presume you're not surprised that the Electoral Commission is following the recommendations of the Dikgang Moseneke panel.
Good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to your viewers. Look, I mean, we are noting the decision by the IEC. Of course, as you said, I mean, we had anticipated that they would perhaps accept the report by the Moseneke inquiry to approach the court or any other relevant body for this postponement. As you know, and as we've been unequivocal in the past, we have been quite steadfast on the fact that we don't believe that the elections should be postponed. However, we've now seen what the IEC has decided to do, and one of the things that we really are committed to is to now looking at the exact mechanism that the IEC wishes to use in the postponement of this election. The reason why is because it becomes very important for a constitutional precedent, depending on how the IEC intends on making this postponement. We'll also be looking very closely also at very strict timelines, because of course what we don't want is some kind of vague postponement that has no end in sight, because yet again this will present a situation where there's a precedent that is undesirable and that could be dangerous in a constitutional democracy.
So, Siviwe, I think no one can argue with you, or no Democrat can argue with you, that it would be dangerous to set a precedent to postpone an election. I don't want to misunderstand you. Are you suggesting then that you may not oppose this in court? You may not go to court, you may not oppose whatever action the Electoral Commission brings or whatever application it brings, if it's incredibly clear that this does not set a precedent, it's a once-off, and if it is clear that there's a hard deadline by which the local elections would be held? If those two conditions are met, you may not oppose this legally. Is that right?
And others, Stephen, I mean, and others that we would consult our lawyers with, because of course we've got to make sure that all these other loopholes are closed. I mean, I'm making those two examples as the conditions that we are currently looking at, but of course there's others that our lawyers must look at. But yes, what I am saying is that we will look at very closely how the IEC intends on approaching this court, the papers that they will submit, and we will look to see what are some of the reasons and the mechanisms that they plan to use. If those mechanisms are satisfactory, we will hold back. But other than that, we've got to make sure that as the official opposition, we are steadfast in ensuring that the constitutional prescriptions of frequent, free and fair elections are met. And so it will be premature for me to say now what we will do. But what we are saying is that we will look very clear and very closely at what the IEC will do, and it is on that basis that we will make a call on whether or not to take this matter forward.
I mean, your attitude as the Democratic Alliance to this is crucial, because if just one party opposes this, it can create a very difficult situation. If all the parties accept it, then some of the tension might leave this argument. This is why we keep inviting you to react to this in this particular way, apart from the fact that, of course, you're the official opposition. What you seem to be suggesting is that you're going to watch the process closely, and there's a little bit of room for negotiation on this. This could be important room for negotiation.
No, it is an important room for negotiation, because remember, Stephen, I mean, our opposition to this was multi-pronged. It was, number one, we obviously want to save lives and we want to make sure that no one is harmed, but we also want to make sure that we don't start a process where it's COVID this year, it's something else that the executive can come up with in 5 years' time to postpone an election. We want to make sure that there's consistency with the election. We wanted to make sure, and even in the process with the IEC, we proposed a number of ways in which it can realize free and fair and safe elections. And so, yes, of course, we're not going to be rigid for the sake of being rigid. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to look very much closely at some of the telltale problems that we foresee should we just willy-nilly, on the basis or in an undefined process, postpone an election. And so there is room there, but we have to look at the process that the IEC follows. And so even today, after the Moseneke report was tabled on Wednesday, we've been looking very closely, and even during the meeting, our representatives in that meeting earlier today were asking these very crucial questions, because for us, how we then proceed is dependent on how the IEC conducts itself. They are the custodians of rolling out an election, but we are still the custodians of ensuring that the Constitution is upheld. And so how they proceed becomes very important.
Siviwe Gwarube, thanks very much indeed. Spokesperson for the Democratic Alliance. Important developments there, it would seem, if they do accept the outcome of this process. It may mean that there's not going to be huge division on whether or not the local elections should go ahead, whether they go ahead now in October or go ahead next year.